My name is Dr. Bea Lewkowicz. I'm the co-founder and director of the AGR Refugee Voices Testimony. And we started this project in 2003 following an exhibition that we made for the Jewish Museum called Continental Britons, where I made a film with 16 German Jewish refugees. And we created a film and we showed it in the recreation of the Cosmo Cafe. And to our surprise, most people who came to the exhibition really loved the film and sat through the 53 minutes. And in the guest book, somebody wrote the highlight was the film. It was like walking through history. And inspired by the success, we applied to the Association of Jewish Refugees, and they had the foresight to take this on and said, we'll do it, and started interviewing. We started in 2003, as I said, and now it's 2019. And I'm very, very proud that we have conducted almost 250 interviews. Obviously, from the beginning, it had to do with conceiving the whole project, finding a methodology, thinking about what sort of interviews are we going to do. We're doing oral history, life history interviews. So we're not only focusing on the wartime and the Holocaust. It's very important for us as well to find out what did people do after the war, how did they rebuild their lives, so the story doesn't end. So we had to, first of all, create that methodology. Thinking about what sort of shots we want, how do we want to film it. So there was a lot of that at the beginning. Once we had that going, we had a team of people, cameramen, transcribers, and so forth. So we rolled that out. Now we have done it, apart from interviewing, which I love doing. I love interviewing people. Apart from that, it's overseeing the whole process. And the process is very complex because once we've done an interview, it then needs to be transcribed, but then it needs to be edited because the editor always found some mistakes or corrections. And then somebody needs to then check the edited version as well. And due to the languages which we have, which is mostly English, most people want to be interviewed in English. But there's also lots of German, there's Yiddish, there's some Hebrew. So I then have to check the final text. And we can only hope that we have erased most of the mistakes. And I should also say, in the oral history project this size, it is impossible to erase all the mistakes. And one feels a personal responsibility to the interviewees to do your best possible. But we had instances where, an interviewee saw that we had misspelled the place of birth of their father and was very, very upset because it was not... it was misspelled. So that also happens. So our job, or my job, is to make sure that the transcript is as correct as possible, as we possibly can. And then, of course, also make sure that when we use it, it's used in its correct form. And also on the way, on our journey, let's call it from 2003, I've made quite a few films and exhibitions. So when we have funding, that's a wonderful byproduct of this project because we have collected all this material. So the question is, how do we use it? How do we get it out? And we had funding from Austria. We created an exhibition called Double Exposure. We took the exhibition and the film. I made a film for it back to Vienna, and we showed it. And that was a really wonderful, it's a wonderful story in itself. We interviewed somebody whose parents owned a cinema before they emigrated. And when we took the exhibition to Austria, I asked the curator there, is there a cinema where we can show the film? And she said, yes, there is a cinema, Admiral Lichtspiele. And when I heard the name of the cinema, and I'm not from Vienna, I don't know Vienna, I really I couldn't believe it because that cinema was owned by the parents of my interviewee, Henry Ebner. So it was absolutely wonderful that we could show the film called Double Exposure, with the story of the Jews from Austria who had to escape and who found refuge in Britain in the cinema owned by the parents of the interviewee, and it got a very good reception and people were very interested, and the current cinema owner was also very interested. So that for me was a lovely thing as a consequence of our work. Yes, so for me personally, I grew up in Germany. I'm the daughter of two survivors. My parents are from Poland and Czechoslovakia. And what is interesting, I grew up in a Jewish community in Germany without many German Jews. So, because they had emigrated or they were killed. So, in a way, for me, listening to all these stories and interviewing people has a very personal aspect to it, because I always felt and still feel that those are the people I should have met in Germany, but I didn't. They were not there. So, listening to the stories, it does feel a certain gap in my own life, because I grew up in Germany, but as I said, not my parents were not rooted in Germany. They survived elsewhere and then came to Germany. So that's very meaningful. And sometimes you can relate to the places. So I grew up in Cologne. When I interviewed somebody in Cologne, and they lived somewhere near where I lived, or that is quite something. But that's quite concrete. But it's also more abstract. And another way is that as a daughter of survivors, which is quite common, there are lots of questions you cannot ask your parents. Even when your parents talked, and my parents, they talked quite a bit about their experiences. So as an interviewer, because you often don't know people personally, you are detached, you can ask many more questions. And I'm very happy that the Refugee Voices project also delivers the film or the interview to the family. I think that's a very important part of our mission, so that the family has this film. And a lot of the interviewees are not with us anymore, but the films are there, and the family has the films. And I think it's a wonderful thing to have. And for example, I'm very happy that both my parents were interviewed some time ago, and that I can go to the computer now on the internet and I find my father's interview and I can listen to it. And this is from 20 years ago. So hopefully in the future, that will be the same with our interviews, and it is the same. You Google somebody and they find their parents on the internet. And if they want to listen to the interview, they go to the Wiener Library or to other places. Or in fact, if it's not even a family member, we had an instance now where a teacher in Germany was laying some Stolpersteine for a family in a smaller town called Gladbeck. And she Googled them because she wanted she knew they'd emigrated. She didn't know what happened to them. She Googled them and she found that name. The man hadn't changed his name. She found him in the Refugee Voices archive. And so it's a wonderful thing. She contacted us. He's not alive anymore. We could put her in touch with the son and the wife. And hopefully, maybe I think even it's coming up now. They're going to Gladbeck to attend the ceremony. And her pupils, who would have normally just put the Stolpersteine on or learned from the archives what there is about the family, then they now can listen to the person's story. And I think, again, like the Vienna story, that's a wonderful circle in a way, that the story goes back and survives. Yeah, I think the challenge is to be, as an oral history project, we have a responsibility to our interviewees, who are very generous to share their lives with us. So we have a responsibility to deal with this material sensitively. And for other oral history projects as well, the problem is a decontextualization. So a quote is just taken out of context and used by somebody. So that's true for all the materials we use. And even if we use social media, we have to make sure that we use it, let's say, according to the wishes of the people. And also be aware that the web, using something on the website has implication and lots of people can see something. So that has been the challenge. But I'm very happy to say I think we found the right way of using things, and we haven't had so many complaints. But it's a learning process. And so far, everyone, the children or the interviews themselves, are quite happy that we use the material. And I would say people who give testimony, they give testimony because they want the story to be known and they want the story to be spread. And we are all surprised that we still have people coming forward and saying, I haven't been interviewed, please interview me. So the project is ongoing. The Association of Jewish Refugees is committed to interview people as long as they want to be interviewed. So we're here and hopefully to continue more interview, but to also add to our resources and education resource, whether it's in form of a podcast, in forms of more films. Hopefully in the future we'll be able, each interview will have a clip that we can listen to everyone. At the moment, the interviews, if you want to listen to all the interviews, you have to go to certain places, again, to protect the authenticity, or to protect the interviewee themselves. So in the future, hopefully we can get more materials out. And I'm very, very pleased that, with your help, we managed to get the photographs and documents into the public domain. The portraits are in the public domain. The website is not only a normal website, it's a research facility, so that students and pupils and family members can actually use it to do their research. And when they then come to where the collection is held, they know exactly what they want to watch. So I think it's a amazing opportunity. And if you think we've done about 250 interviews, it's hours and hours of footage. We've just redigitized our first 150 interviews. And to my surprise, there were 548 hours, the whole first 150 interviews. I don't know how many hours the next 100 are, but we can find out. But that is a lot of footage. So, I'm very happy that the website in a way can help people to access the material. For me, the most significant moment is if I feel that, I've connected to a person, I've helped them tell the story, and, they feel after we finished that they are, in a way, happy is the wrong word, but, that it did something to them. And so one of my highlights is when a lady came up to me and said, I'm done now. I've told you the story. I don't have to tell it again. And that's, for me, very, very personal, very moving. But what's also very moving, and I think it illustrates the value of oral history, is that, we are really filming history from below, history, lived experiences, and that they enrich our understanding in a very nuanced way. So we can learn little details, very little details. For example, it was Kristallnacht. Somebody was not with their parents, with another family. The family just left, and the person was left. A small young boy was left in the flat, didn't know what to do. Or another instance, a boy was on the street, saw something burning, tried to call the fire brigade. And to his surprise, the fire brigade, they were just standing around, couldn't understand it. Why are they not doing anything? And to listen to this, I think it's very moving. So they're the small little details, but then they're also the big stories. And we recently had the big story when we interviewed a man called Paul Willer, who we interviewed, and he was telling us in the interview, he came with his mother and brother, and he was fostered by somebody for 4 months, and the name of the person was Clement Attlee, who was then the Labour leader. And I was quite surprised. I'd never heard about the fact that Clement Attlee had fostered somebody. So when I came home, I Googled it, tried to find information, and there was absolutely nothing. And we were very happy then that we could arrange a reunion between Paul Willer and the grandchildren of Clement Attlee, and had a wonderful tea in the House of Lords. So that illustrates the bigger picture, because without this interview, or without Paul Willer having told his story, the wider world, and this was picked up by the press and went really everywhere, wouldn't have known that Clement Attlee had fostered a refugee boy, because Clement Attlee himself, for I don't know exactly why, it wasn't mentioned, or he didn't narrate it in his biography. So this is another example where we found out something really quite interesting on the bigger scale. So the highlights for me are, it's in between those stories. But also the realization that not everyone could overcome trauma, so that is very personal and sometimes very inspirational, how people manage with loss and trauma and separation and displacement, but also to acknowledge that some people didn't manage. And those are the difficult interviews where you find that people, couldn't really overcome this, huge abyss. So you have that sort of spectrum. But as I said, I think in an the wonderful thing about an oral history interview is that you're there to help the person tell the story, and that you make a connection, And hopefully, it's a beneficial. And then later, so many people can watch this interview. And now I can make a film with people who are not with us anymore, and their voice is there and preserved. We're going to have, from the AGR, there's going to be a blue plaque being erected for a refugee artist here in Hampstead called Milan Kosman and her husband Hans Keller. And I made a film with her interview, a short film. And now it's on our website. People can, when they see the plaque, hopefully they can go to our website and listen to her. She grew up in Bonn, and listen to her talking about the Rhine and talking about the art, and it's there. So it's not only a blue plaque, it's also the interview. So I feel very privileged that we have collected these stories and that they will stay with us for the future.